Judy.
Hi.
Judy, say your name and when did you join the club?
My name is Judy Irving, and my dear friend John Hughes got me into swimming in the bay in 1984, and I joined in 1989, 34 years ago, which is practically half my life. And I want to talk about how my love for the club translated into the movies that I make, because I'm a documentary filmmaker. That's what I do for a living. And when I joined in 1989, I was so enthusiastic, and George Farnsworth was so much a part of the club, literally answering the door and being really friendly and being the narcissist that he is, that I started filming that year. I filmed the New Year's Alcatraz swim, and he was part of that. It ended up in a movie that I made called Secrets of the Bay, which was largely about the hidden wildlife of the bay, the stuff that most folks don't see or appreciate. And I decided to include South End Rowing Club swimmers as part of that wildlife. So they're in that movie, which came out in 1990. And then moving right along, I really got interested in George Farnsworth, and I started collecting footage of him from another friend who did a student film about him. And I put together all this stuff that I had, and we filmed his last Alcatraz swim. We had a feeling it might be his last Alcatraz swim. Norm Peterson was his swim guide. What was his rowboat captain, and Bruce Armbruster was his swim guide. So long story short, after George died, I made a movie about him, a whole movie, and featuring Lee Bender, who used to live with him and tells a fabulous story at one of the St. Patrick's Day parties, which is in the movie. So that film came out in 2007.
The title?
And the title is 19 Arrests, No Convictions. And that's what George was really proud of. He had a bar out on Geneva Avenue near the Cow Palace, and the bar got busted 19 times, but there was never any arrest. So anyway, so that's another short film, along with Secrets of the Bay. And then moving right along, what was really cool, I don't know if you can see the pelican behind me, can you?
Yes.
See the pelican? The very week that I started another movie about the bay and about my love for the bay, called Pelican Dreams, this bronze statue of the pelican showed up right here on the South End Rowing Club dock. And I thought, okay, that is a good sign. So I made a film called Pelican Dreams in 2014, and that includes swimmers and pelicans and you name it. So then we also made a music video here on the dock called Papa John. It was a film that featured a song that my husband Mark Bittner wrote when he was 17, and it was sort of a re-envisioning of that song. And we did it right out here on the dock with Zach Stewart, who is a lifetime member of both clubs, and with his wife Annie Somerville. So then, you know, I really love the club. I think you can tell, but it had been percolating for a really long time. How should I tell the story of the South End Rowing Club and the characters here? I didn't want to make a movie about people setting records. That's been done. And it's a little bit egotistical. It can be interpreted that way. I also didn't want to make a testimonial, because I don't necessarily want to harangue people to swim in the bay. So what started as a hobby film, where I was just asking folks out on the beach, how do you talk yourself into getting into the cold water? And I filmed a whole bunch of people telling me how they do that. It evolved as I got to know more people in the club who had really dramatic stories that had to do with how swimming in cold, open water really mitigates major life challenges. Like, for instance, here are some of my stars in what became Cold Refuge, my feature documentary about the South End Rowing Club and the Bay. Miles Cope, paralyzed from the waist down in an industrial accident, dives off Fort Mason Pier with Ned Weil. His theme is face the fear. Zina Duretsky, an immigrant from Russia and a fabulous swimmer, got really bad breast cancer and decided to deal with it by having parties here at the club. She had a hat party, a crazy hat party, where her husband shaved her head the day before she got her first chemo treatment so that she could beat the chemo in a way. She had a fabulous idea to swim to chemo because once she started her treatments, she looked at the map and she said, hey, wait a minute, it's not that far from the South End Club around to Pier 23. Why don't I swim there? So that's in the movie too, Swim to Chemo. Then she realized, okay, she said something like, I knew right away that the breasts were going to come off. My surgery was coming up, and I wanted to do something fun prior to that. So I had a bye-bye boobies barbecue with a floating barbecue out at the opening, and people roasted booby-shaped food, s'mores, marshmallows. They made s'mores, and they ate them out there in the water around this floating barbecue. So the resilience and the joy and the, I don't know, just the bravery of the folks that I found here at the South End Rowing Club to include in this film were just really inspiring. Lisa Sarabin, an attorney, under a lot of stress because she's always fighting for the little guy. She's fighting for cancer patients who have had their benefits cut off. She's fighting for people like Miles who have been in accidents and who can't get the workers' comp. So she comes down here, and sometimes she's at the beach and she says, sometimes I wonder, what am I doing here? You know? And then she says, this is who I am. This is what I do. And she talks about how you're swimming either away from something that you want to get away from, or you're swimming to something that you want to become. And she said it's a search for happiness, isn't it? She has done some long swims, and I included stills from a beautiful long swim she did from Point Richmond to the back to the Point Bonita. And in that, she said, you know, the long swims have taught me that no matter what is thrown at you, whether it's wind, tides, current, you will face it. You can face it. And you will move from the darkness to the light. She literally started in darkness in that Point Richmond swim, and she moved into the light. So metaphorically, that has been something that I've kept in my heart as a mantra. You know, Corvin Bosgan is blind. He's also a South End member. He swims tethered to a sighted swimmer. You may have seen them swimming around the cove. Two swimmers swimming pretty close together. Well, they're tethered, and one of them can see and one of them can't. And so Corvin talks about losing his eyesight since he was a child. It's getting worse and worse and worse. It's getting smaller and smaller to the point where now he only sees through a tiny little hole in the center. And he knows that he'll lose it at some point. But he wants to keep swimming, and he wants to keep working. So these folks are just incredibly inspiring to me. There's one more story I want to tell. It's another set of characters in Cold Refuge, which was this love story to the club and the folks in it. It's the Maccarini family. Emma Maccarini and Danny Maccarini used to swim with the mom, Joan Mankin, Danny's wife, Emma's mom, down here at the club for years. And then she died. And they commune with her in the bay. They manage their grief by swimming in the bay. Her ashes are in the bay. And so it's it's about mental health. It's about resilience. It's about perseverance. It's about joy. It's about silliness. It's about swimming with animals, swimming with predators who could kill you, and, you know, developing a lot of humility out of that attitude. And it's about how the cold water produces, literally can produce visions of unseen, invisible currents and sort of the oneness of nature, full immersion in nature. That's what I love about this club, having opened all that up to me. And I have put it into my movies, and I invite you to watch all of them, including and especially my new feature documentary, Cold Refuge, which is coming out this year, the 150th anniversary of the South End Rowing Club.
Okay, Judy, tell us more about your filming.
Okay. Another character in Cold Refuge, I think Susan Blue told me about him. Several people did. They said, "Do you know Naji Ali?"
Yes, tell us more.
And I didn't know him, but I wanted to get to know him because they said that he had a really interesting story to tell about swimming. And that story is in the movie. He grew up in San Diego, pretty far from the ocean, but he always looked at it longingly. He really always wanted to swim in open water, but he didn't have enough money to take swim lessons. His family didn't have the money, and it wasn't sort of the cultural thing to do because of discrimination over the years against blacks in along the shore on beaches. So anyway, he got a summer job at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and he was out on a boat with some biologists, and he was having a great time, and one of the biologists jumped into the water and started swimming around because it was hot out. And when he got back on the boat, Naji said, "God, that looks great. Can you teach me how to do that?" And the biologist looked at him and said, "Oh, kid, black people don't swim." And it was humiliating for him. It was embarrassing for him. Everybody laughed. Even he laughed. But he was so embarrassed that he didn't know how to swim. This is when he was 13. That it took him 30 years to try. He finally, inspired by Colin Jones, an African-American swimmer in the Olympics, he finally was inspired by Colin Jones to learn how to swim when he was in his 40s. And then he joined the South End Club, and he was getting better and better, and he was practicing for longer and longer swims. This is when I caught up with him. And I was able to go to Southern California with him when he was doing a very long practice swim between Santa Monica Pier and Venice Pier. And he was taking stroke lessons from his coach, a white coach, Stuart McDougall. Well, long story short, Naji got so good at what he was doing and swimming in open water that he is now a coach. He's a total immersion coach, and he has a bunch of jobs, and he coaches kids in high school, and his whole life has turned around because of the open water. And he wants to encourage more African Americans to dip their toe in.
Well, that's a great story, Judy. Thank you for spending the time and capturing things that Naji has done, and hopefully that will inspire a lot more black African American kids and get in the water and swim.
Yes, exactly. That's what he wants to do, and that's what he's doing. Yeah.
That's nice. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Judy, when you joined back then, there must be a lot fewer members compared to now. What do you think? What's your perspective?
Well, when I first joined, there were not that many members. And we were literally just, 13 years away from having allowed women in the club in 1976. I joined in 89, 12 years. So, no, 13. Anyway, it was a small club. I think it was about a few, 300 or 400, but I'm not sure. And now in 2023, it's enormous. It's over 1,800 members. So it's different. And there used to be a cultural initiation, so to speak, so that you learned what you needed to do as a South End member, as a volunteer. For instance, before you were allowed to swim Alcatraz back then, you had to be a member for 6 months, and you had to do at least 2 volunteer helps at other swims. Now I'm not sure that there are any requirements for an Alcatraz swim, but I think there should be, you know, and it helps when you're required for some reason to do volunteering, then it becomes part of your habit, you know, and this is a volunteer club. We really need volunteers. And the folks, some of the folks who have joined recently tend to think of it as, you know, a cheap version of the Bay Club or something, but that's not it at all. We are a nonprofit club running entirely with volunteers, except for, I think, the bookkeeper. So we need volunteer help. And how do we get that across to 1,800 plus members? It's a toughie. But, you know, one of the things might be to assign a mentor, an older mentor to each new member, if that's possible. I don't know, as they come in, and pass on some of this oral cultural teaching, which is a lot like what, you know, Native Americans did in their own tribes, and lots of cultures do that. It's an oral tradition. It's not necessarily, okay, take these bylaws and read these, and take this PDF about volunteering and read this. No, invite the new member to a volunteer opportunity, like cleaning up the club once a month, or cooking for one of the swims, or, you know, kayaking, or doing body marking. There's all kinds of things that you can do. Yeah. So we need volunteers, yes.
Yeah. Volunteer is a great thing at the club, and it helps us to be together and to make the club better.
Yes. It also creates a sense of community. Yes. And I'm sure lots of people talk about the sense of community. It's palpable. I'm so grateful for it. It's multi-generational. Where can you interact with people from, you know, 8 years old to 98? Where can you interact with people who have different political views or different, you know, countries of origin? You can do it here in the context of sport and fun and events. And you can leave your politics at the door. That's what I do anyway. When I come down here, I do not want to get into those kinds of arguments. I just want to come down here and have a really good time swimming in the bay. And I did try rowing. You know, I still row a little bit. Tried running. I tried handball. It hurt too much. But you can try them all and volunteer.
All right. Judy, thank you very much.
Thank you.